we want everybody to be strategic and we want to have long-term plans, but we need to make sure that we use the word strategic correctly because being strategic sometimes is not necessarily the one battle that we're winning. That's tactical.
Yeah.
Welcome to the 4 Bars Podcast. I'm Ken Leith.
And I'm Patty Leith. We are your hosts for some compelling dialogue, encouraging our listeners to strengthen their connections
And build strong communities, lifting each other up and connecting in ways that matter.
We named the podcast 4 Bars as a reference to how hard we work to find a 4 Bars connection on our devices.
And we wondered what could happen with relationships if we worked as hard at connecting.
Let's find out. Welcome back to 4 Bars. I'm Patty Leith, and I have with me...
And I'm Ken Leith.
And we have Brandon Taylor, who's the Senior Vice President of Transportation with JB Hunt Transport. This is our second discussion with Brandon. In the first one, if you haven't checked it out, you should go back and check it out. We really talked about his story, how he got to be where he is today. And today we want to talk about your time in transportation as a leader and your rise to senior leadership and how you lead and manage. So welcome.
All right, thank you. Appreciate being here. Once again, I know this is our second time, but I think this one's even going to be better.
I do too.
I think it has all the possibility for that, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your career.
Yeah, so when I left Tallahassee, Florida, moved to Miami, and I started working at Aaron Rinson Sales Furniture.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and so I did that. And I was there, selling furniture and lease to own furniture. And I think I was there for 4 months. And they asked if I would like to open an office for them in Michigan.
Oh,
and I was like, okay. And I was in Miami, Florida. And so, I moved up pretty quickly at that organization. And at the time, they weren't opening offices with people who had been at the organization for 4 months. And so they sent me out to San Diego. I got to work out there, sent me to Salt Lake City, Utah, got to work there, worked with the group doing the Winter Olympics.
Oh, wow, fun.
Yeah, sent me up to I went to Schaumburg, Illinois, and basically what we were doing in Schaumburg, Illinois and Melrose Park, Illinois, we worked on the PGA Championship in '99 in Medina, Illinois, and that was the first time I got to see Tiger Woods in person.
Oh, wow.
Now, I was from afar, but got to see him. And then the last thing they did, we had to go to Boston, and we worked on the Ryder Cup. And so once again, what Aaron Rinson Sales Furniture did is that they put together like the Parson chairs and all of the things that would be inside the tent for people to sit down at the different golf tournaments and things of that nature. And I was traveling a lot. And I went to Conshohocken, PA, that was outside of Philadelphia. And I had a 1-year-old child at the time, and I had been married for, a short amount of time as well. Came back to Farmington, Michigan, and I came in the house and my daughter cried. Because she didn't cry because she was happy I was home. She cried because I was traveling so much and she didn't necessarily know who I was.
Yeah, that hits hard.
That hit hard. And that broke my heart. And so I'm like, hey, listen, I may be good at this. You all may want to continue to send me all around all these different places, but this has to stop.
Yeah.
And so worked there for about a year up in Michigan. And unfortunately, it's a beautiful story. So once again, talking about my career, but this is a beautiful story. My wife's grandparents passed away within the same month.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
They had been married 61 years. Oh, wow. So my wife's grandfather passed away. And then her grandmother passed away. And so we came back to Miami to help support her mom, who was going through some things at the time. And she's doing phenomenal, things of that nature. But we came back just because we wanted to be closer to my wife's family.
Sure.
And so I thought about, what am I going to do next? Because I didn't have a plan when I moved back. So talked about, well, maybe I'll go to the firefighters college in Ocala, Florida. So I went and took the Miami-Dade County firefighter exam, did really well on that. did the physical exam. I was like, well, I think I'm going to become a firefighter. Um, and, lo and behold, there were two different opportunities. And one opportunity, I talked about a little bit earlier, but one opportunity is with a company that was importing freight from South and Central America.
Okay.
And then there's another company called C.H. Robinson. Had never heard of it. When I was in school in the 90s, there weren't a lot of supply chain courses, and I never took one.
They didn't have degrees in it back then.
I didn't know what a C.H. Robinson was. I never saw a C.H. Robinson truck go down the road. But when you listen to the first one, I had made mention of Joel Kennedy.
Yes.
And he's been very influential in my life, and he was very influential as a coach and a mentor. And so I decided to start working at C.H. Robinson. And, I came in, did some of the sales, was pretty successful with that. And after working there for about 3 years, I got the opportunity to go open my own office in Michigan. And so I opened an office back in Michigan for C.H. Robinson, did that for about 4 years, moved to Atlanta, Georgia, managed their sales for that region.
Okay.
And I hope you don't mind me getting a little personal, even though we're talking about career.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Okay, so
absolutely.
Came home in April of 2009, and I thought I was really successful. I thought I was doing all the things that I was supposed to do. And my wife said, you're cheating on me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, you're cheating on me with C.H. Robinson. And so I never want to lose my family. And so the decision was really easy to make. So I wrote my letter of resignation that night, and I turned it in the next day. And I was like, okay, what's next? And so I had a 2-year non-compete, did a couple of things. My wife and I, during that time, and my kids, we moved back to Miami.
Okay.
And so here's me. So Michigan, primary home, Miami, my second home. And so that's how my travels always tend to go.
Yeah.
So I moved back down to Miami, did a couple of things, worked on a mayoral campaign. That candidate didn't win, but still got to hone some of my skills. When I was in college, one of the jobs I had, I used to do a lot of the writing of scripts that people would cold call for, or writing of the letters that would be sent out for political contributions. And so that was just funny to think about that. But then J.B. Hunt had contacted me in April of 2011, once my non-compete ended. And I was like, Alan Crumley, great guy, Alan, contacted me. Yeah, I want you to, take a look. We got your name. Not interested. It's like, seriously, not interested. And at the time, I didn't want to go back into corporate America because I had saw what happened in 2009. And I'm an all or nothing guy.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, I'm not going to do that. And we were also talking about my wife and I moving our family to Belize. And so we were like, look, I want to go to Belize. I could definitely get up and be in a hammock and do some other things and export.
You get what I'm
saying?
I get what you're saying.
That's really what I was looking at doing.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, my wife said, we're pregnant again. I'm like, how did that happen? And so, And so I called Alan Crumley back and said, do you still have that job? And he's like, well, you got an interview for it. I was like, I thought you were just offering it to me. And so came here, interviewed for the job. And in the interview, I got to meet for the first time Shelly Simpson and Eric McGee. And Shelly is our CEO now at J.B. Hunt. And Eric McGee is my EVP. And getting to make those relationships early on in my career at J.B. Hunt and getting the invitations to the different things of just trying to, understand that this is a very inclusive environment because I had never been to Arkansas first off. And so that was a culture shock.
Yeah, a little bit.
And my expectations were different. Okay, so then I get up here, and when I first interviewed, I interviewed a week after the Joplin tornado.
Okay.
And so when you come in from the airport for those who are not local, it doesn't look like a city when you first get here.
Yeah.
And so you're driving from the airport, and then I was by the reservoir, and the road was flooded.
Yeah, we had some terrible storms
You
here
know what I'm
right
saying?
after that.
Yeah, and so I'm calling my wife like, maybe I made a mistake. But long story short, it was great. And, I told everybody during the interview process, well, my wife's pregnant. I can't leave my family in Miami, because one of the things that JB Hunt does a great job with is when they bring on a new leader, they want that leader to get acculturated to the organization.
Agreed.
And one thing that Shelley always stated was that she didn't want you to get acclimated. She didn't want you to just become JB Hunt, but she wanted you to bring some of your own culture, that when you're getting acculturated, you're adding to the JB Hunt family.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that she made really clear at the beginning. And so they were like, well, okay, well, yeah, just bring your wife and kids up here. And I was like, really? And so it made it easy to fall in love, because, how many organizations just say that at the beginning?
Yeah.
They don't know me. I might have interviewed well, but they don't know me. And so to have that trust at the beginning, it already allows you to buy in. And it also allowed my family to buy in. And so then, my youngest and my fourth and final child was born in December of 2011. My family went back, when school began, and I moved back to Florida at that time, and I opened an office in Miami. I'll make this part quick. I hired some really good people. I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today without those individuals. Andy McDonough, he's one of our national account execs at JB Hunt. He was a phenomenal number 2 in the office. He allowed me to go out and sell when he would operate and execute on the business for us to be successful. And, all of the people that we brought on, they were just really great individuals. And in May of 2013, there was an opportunity for a VP role. And so I took that opportunity, and I moved my family back to Northwest Arkansas. Once again, not even knowing that having that summer with my family here made it much easier to convince my wife and kids to move up here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And so then I spent 5 years in a VP of transportation role, wherein I had different responsibilities, whether it was one region of the country or another region, because we switched regions around for, during different times. And then in August of 2018, I was promoted to senior VP.
Okay.
And that's been the role I've been in since that time, excuse me. And, that's changed over time. We've gone through different structures and different ways on how we want to attack the market and how we want to engage and connect with our customers. And at this time, I feel that we've had so many different iterations. We understand exactly what structure is best to solve for our customers today. And I feel that we are starting to see a lot of traction, even with the volatility in the market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very well said. You mentioned a couple of times, actually in the prior episode, but also in this one, relationships.
Yeah.
What do relationships look like? You told us a little bit about how it worked with you across the organization, and how does that sometimes permeate out to your customers and your vendors?
Yeah. So, it's funny. Before I came here today, we had a customer meeting earlier, and relationships mean everything.
Yeah.
Because I want to ensure that our customers understand that there's a seamless relationship across the board, regardless if it's a different business unit or a different individual that is working with the customer. We want our sellers at JB Hunt to be ambassadors for JB Hunt when they are marketing our brand, when they are selling to customers and providing solutions or setting up a solution for them. But with the same foot, they need to also look at being an advocate for the customer internally. Nobody should care more than they do about ensuring that we are meeting those customer needs. And the easiest way to do that is based off of relationships. You want to use relational authority and not just positional authority to get things done.
Absolutely.
And so when you have a good relationship with somebody, or even better, a great relationship, it makes it a lot easier to get things accomplished.
Yep, that totally makes sense.
And what are some of the fundamentals that you think are important in relationship building?
I think listening is probably the most important. And what I mean by that is that if both people are just sitting there in a room and they're just waiting for the other to speak, that's not going to work. But when it comes to the communication and listening, just being able to understand that you can get together to meet the needs or solve for the challenge or problem that may be at hand. One thing I always tell people is it's never enough to be on the same page. What does that even mean, being on the same page?
Yeah, I agree.
I would rather us be in the same book. So you could be on page 2 and I could be on 22. I can wait for you until you get to page 22. But if we're both on page 22, but we're in different books, we're not communicating. Well, and there's a lot of ways that misinterpretations or misperceptions can occur because we're not in the same book.
Right.
And so for me, listening is so important.
And the dialogue, which is inherent in that, is I have to ask questions and I have to listen.
Yes, absolutely.
But that really is the core of what builds a strong communication or a strong relationship, and then communication also takes some adaptation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And just being able to sometimes show grace.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Because
so true. Yeah.
We can tell people, and I'm not saying we do this at JB Hunt, but we can tell people, leave that at the door. Well, sometimes things are going to impact us, and every one of us is going to have a day that we're not our best selves.
Yeah.
And so giving somebody that grace for those days when they're not their best selves builds a stronger relationship as well.
Yeah. And we are the same person inside of our personal connections and our work-related connections.
Absolutely.
And yes, we have a different focus in each, but we are the same person with the same experiences. Yes. And you talked in the last one about character and integrity, but you bring those to all of your circles, right?
100,000%.
Yeah. Yes. So they blend, they mix.
Yeah. And even in our work that we do sometimes with coaching, for example, and we hear about, leaving it at home or leaving it at the office. And we take a little bit different perspective of it, the fact that we don't do that because it's not, humans can't just turn things on and off psychologically and everything else. But what we can do is figure out how to best integrate the two, because there are going to be days, to your point, you want to leave it at the office, but it's going to spill over potentially a little bit in your home life and vice versa.
Yeah.
So when we see that happening, that's something, how do you figure that balance out, to point a little bit too? Let's talk about how you balance those a little bit.
Yeah. So, I'll start with just myself and talking about it. I'm just happy that I have a very understanding wife, because, there are times that, you don't want to necessarily go across the threshold with some of the challenges or the pressures of the job. And, in transportation, and especially with JB Hunt, we get to touch so many. Commerce runs our nation. And so there are so many different things that are impacted based off the work that we do at JB Hunt. Like, we keep the country moving.
Yes.
Whether it's with intermodal, whether it's with dedicated, whether it's with our highway solutions. I mean, we really keep the country moving. And so there are days that are better than others, and there are days that are a little more challenging than others. And just having that balance, understanding that you need to ensure that you have distressors, having conversations. I mentioned earlier, Patty, you were a therapist for me for a few years. Just having that outlet wherein you could talk about things and just get them off your chest. And then I will be honest, one of the things that I love the most about JB Hunt that really allows for the original point of your question, Ken, is that there's an open door policy. And our executives listen. They truly listen.
Yeah.
Whether they go out and have town halls, whether the way we engage with all of our people, with surveys and things of that nature, I feel fortunate that I can go and talk to the president of our division, Nick Hobbs, and say, Nick, this is how I feel about something. and he will listen. And it doesn't mean that he's going to change based off of what I've said, but at least he'll listen to my feedback and say, well, have you thought about it this way?
Yeah. He'll consider it and he'll provide you.
He'll consider it. And,
insight.
you know, and, you know, at the end of the day, there are going to be some with a little more wisdom.
Yeah.
And there are going to be some who have a different purview, or they may be able to look at a little higher level. So you might think that you have a 50,000 foot view where they're looking at 80,000 feet. And so just knowing that you have that outlet makes it a lot easier to be able to de-stress and find that balance on that. Because, you know, one other thing, you know, we try not to talk about work-life balance, but it's work-life satisfaction.
Yes. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
So yesterday, I got back. I had traveled to Florida with a couple of individuals, and I was walking around, and somebody had said to me, "Man, BT, I haven't seen you in a while. You know, have you been traveling?" I was like, "Yeah, I was traveling." It was like, "Oh, for work or for pleasure?" I said, "Well, when I travel for work, it's always a pleasure."
Well done.
Yeah,
Well done.
but you know, you make it what it is. You know, it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so when you're able to have that passion for people, the purpose of what you're trying to do, and meeting the needs of the community and the people that engage with JB Hunt, it is a pleasurable experience.
Absolutely. That kind of leads me to a different kind of question. If you could go back and talk to yourself,
Yeah.
a younger self, let's just say it's the first day that you start for JB Hunt.
Sure.
What would you want to tell yourself if you could go back and kind of take about that?
Share your ideas sooner. Speak up more when you first get there. And once again, for me, it was more along the lines of I had never worked in a corporate environment. Now, I'd worked for large corporations,
Yes.
but being on a corporate campus and almost, I don't want to say almost, but yeah, almost every engagement seemed like an interview because you navigated a little different. You know, when you're in a field location or you're in a location that's a satellite office away from the corporate campus, you help create some of that culture. And so having that unfamiliarity of being in a corporate environment was different for me. And I see now, because I speak a lot, like people say, "Golly, okay, would you stop?" But but I would tell my younger self to speak up freely, more, you know, a lot faster, just because there are times that I probably allowed us to go through certain things that if I would have spoke up and articulated ideas well, we might have avoided some of the things that we faced.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I don't know if you remember this, but the first time that we met, you had started a leadership coaching program with our company. And back then, the remote camera thing was something I had to send to you. We were Skyping back then. But you were coming into corporate for a meeting. And we had scheduled a meeting, and I was unable to get into the building with my badge. And so I texted you, and you were in a meeting with Shelley. Do you remember that?
I do.
She had just offered you the VP role.
Yeah.
So when you came out, your eyes were about this big. But we spent a lot of time talking about it's a big difference.
It is.
What were some of the biggest differences when you went from being outside of the corporate environment to being a leader inside of it?
Yeah, so, you know, it's funny because we talked earlier about you're the same person inside or outside of work, but in a different role, you can manage your subordinates. Wherein when I became a VP, it was really how can I influence my colleagues a lot more, and then also being able to influence upwards. And, you know, being free with, because here it is, at the end of the day, my job is to make sure that my bosses don't make a mistake.
Yes.
And, you know, I said a little bit earlier that they may be looking at 80,000 foot view. Well, maybe because I'm a little closer to the ground, I can see something they don't see.
Yeah.
And so I need to be able to provide that same visibility to them. And I need to be able to paint that picture really well, because if they're looking at it one way and I'm not, then it's going to be a miss.
Yeah.
And so
the need for a VP to manage up and down.
Yeah.
You know, you're now managing, leading leaders really,
Yes.
as opposed to managing staff.
That's right.
And while you're also driving strategy.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's a different. Well, what got you there doesn't get you forward.
No, it doesn't. You know, and I talk a lot to my teams about. Here's the deal. Yeah, we want everybody to be strategic, and we want to have long-term plans, but we need to make sure that we use the word strategic correctly, because being strategic sometimes is not necessarily the one battle that we're winning. That's tactical.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, you know, ensuring that people understand the difference there. But even in my role today, although I have to be strategic, I need to be able to understand what's happening on the battlefield. And I'm just using an analogy that way because, you know, from some of my background from, you know, growing up on military bases. But, you know, when you look at the tactical things around execution and the operational excellence that you need to provide, well, that allows for the strategic initiatives or objectives to be met because you're winning on the tactical side.
Absolutely.
But you could have the best strategy. You could create the greatest strategy in the world and have the best intent, but be unable to tactically execute.
Yes.
You're not going to win.
Yeah.
You're exactly
It's,
right.
it's the key component when we work with growth clients to figure out what you do today to make that happen.
Yes.
You want to align your actions today to your goals, but you can't spend all your time in that goal set.
That's right.
You have
Absolutely.
to connect the two.
Yeah. I mean, because ideation is great, but action can be better.
Yes.
You know, but we need both.
Yeah.
We need both.
You do need both, but action's key.
Yeah.
Now you work in an area of the company that's growing quite a bit. What are some of the most important things that you tell your teams as they are going after growth goals?
Yeah, so the most important thing that I tell my teams right now is to ensure that we have the right people in the right seat.
Okay.
Because it starts with the people. Starts with the people. You know, this is a people business.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my role, we work with customers, carriers, and our employees. And so I want a great customer experience. I want a great carrier experience, which is a customer who happens to have a truck. And then I want our employees to have a great experience. But they can't necessarily have a great experience if they're not in the right seat.
Yeah.
You know, we talked earlier about being in the right space on the field when we looked at the soccer analogy. And that's the same thing with our people. We need to make sure that they understand sometimes you're going to have to go through this position to understand what happens over here to be successful to get over here. Yeah, I never want to play goalie. Well, you need to understand why I have you playing goalie right now, because if we don't close the back end, if we're not retaining our customers, we're not going to grow. And so sometimes you have to talk to people about, I need to put you in this position for a while so you can learn what we need to do here.
Right.
Then I can put others in a role where they're going to be offensive. Maybe they're the right forward and the left forward. You know, everybody's not going to be the center fielder.
Yeah.
Everybody's not going to be the person who's going to kick the ball right at the beginning. That's not where it's going to happen. And so ensuring that you clearly communicate the vision connected with the mission and then putting the right people in the right seat is the first thing that I would do, and it makes it a lot easier to get things accomplished.
It clarifies for everyone.
Yeah.
And which is one of the big things. Kind of a slightly different question for you.
Sure.
And this is kind of from your perspective, is what's your hope for the next generation of leaders? And what is it that you want to share with them when it comes to connecting, whether that's internally, externally, within the communities where they work, and how they impact the world that they connect with?
Yeah, so to the next group of leaders, live your purpose. That, I mean, it sounds like I could put that on a T-shirt, but seriously, and I really mean that.
Be a
Live
good
your
T-shirt.
Yeah, because it's live your purpose. Because one, being a manager and being a leader are two totally different things. You know, can you manage a process? Sure, and you could be great at it, but that doesn't mean you're a leader. And then also as a leader, This one, it stings sometimes when people hear this. But when you're a leader, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be led.
Okay.
Because once again, you get into certain roles, you're going to have a vision and a mission that you're connecting, and then it's your responsibility to lead from that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may still get provided with coaching. Look, we all say that, well, let me not say it that way. I'm in Northwest Arkansas, so I know how some people feel about Patrick Mahomes. But many people would say that Tom Brady is the best quarterback ever. But when he was winning Super Bowls, he still had a quarterback coach.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
There were certain things around mechanics that he had to do to continue to improve upon his skills. And so as a leader, you have to lead and not be led. You can still get coached, but you're not led. And so I would want the next generation of leaders to understand that it's so important for them to lead, to have passion for what they're doing, and live their purpose. Because if they do that, that brings profitability.
Absolutely, every time.
Every time.
Yeah, every time. Yeah.
And, in a corporation, we need to be profitable.
Yeah.
And so, you do that, you'll be profitable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you'll have some fun along the way.
And you have fun, yeah, because you're living your purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it makes it easy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, we have so enjoyed this conversation with you. As we wrap up, are there any last minute thoughts that you can leave with our listeners about tackling leadership and career and balancing that with work and family?
Yeah, I would say it this way. When you're looking at leadership, starting your job, making it a career, always remember that the foundation is your family. And, family starts with the F, foundation starts with the F. And so regardless of anything else, you got to make sure that you have those blocks together. And then when you look at your friends, your family, foundation, I added that friends part in right there.
I love it.
You want to make sure that you're starting there. That's right. You're building that village. And so to be the best that you want to be and the most successful, you have to make sure that you feel right about yourself. And if you don't have that village or those individuals running with you, it makes it a lot harder. And, people have used the term, it's lonely at the top. It does not have to be.
I agree.
Agreed.
So a great leader should never feel lonely. I am 100% being that. Yeah, I'll leave him with that. A great leader is never lonely.
I like that.
Love it. I love it.
Again, we appreciate your time today and all that you shared for our listeners. I do have one question. It's not actually to you.
Okay.
It's to your daughter with her podcast.
Okay, yeah.
That hopefully after you being on our podcast, that she will invite you to be on her podcast.
She doesn't want to hear from her dad. No, I'm joking.
Well, maybe we could invite her to be on ours. How's that?
There you go.
Both of you together, that could be. We haven't done one.
We
like
haven't
that.
done one like that.
Yeah, it's funny. My mom says all the time, "Oh, Brandy is just like she looks like my wife, so she's beautiful, but she is so much like me and how she thinks and engages with people." So yeah, it would be funny.
Yeah. When you were starting the discussion and you were sharing that you worked with the event planning.
Yeah.
One of the things that event planning has in common with logistics is the number of variables that have to connect in order for success to occur. And so it's a deeply analytical, think about all the components. And so she probably has a lot of that thinking as well.
Yeah, she does. She does.
Yeah.
Brandy's a little different.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, listeners. And if you're watching, remember to subscribe and tell your friends. It's great to see you.
Until next time, thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
The 4 Bars podcast has been brought to you by Edges Inc., a growth advisory firm based in Bentonville, Arkansas. I founded the company in 2001.
Edges promotes growth of people, companies, and ideas. Our team collaboration tool, called Interface Methods, is a basis for teams to work together more collaboratively, understand each other, and accept differences and address challenges together.
We also started a nonprofit called Unform Your Bias. We teach kids and their adult influencers how to utilize storytelling as a means to reduce bias in the world. We hope you'll check us out, subscribe to our podcast, and look at our websites.